And 3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody? Mark and Sarah back again for another episode of Able Today. Sarah, how you feeling?
Feeling good. Really great episode that we have for our audience today. I think, as we say all the time, Mark, they get better and better. And this really focuses on a community and an organization that we haven't talked a lot about, and that's independent living.
Yeah, I'm excited to have that conversation. But before we do that, I was recently on the Jennifer Hudson show, and one of the questions that she asked me was, what changes would I like to see to improve the disability community? And it took me a second to answer it because we do live in this space where DEI is being challenged. And a lot of what I think needs to be done is having more voices of diversity, specifically people with disability, at the table. And we had a little conversation about that, Jennifer and I, and it was really impactful because I think a lot of times we lose sight in how valuable it is to have a voice at the table with experience in a space that other people might not have experience, right? We talk about ableism a lot and how that's reflected naturally because if you don't have a disability or if you've never had to interact with a family member or friend with a disability, you really don't understand the experience. So by just having that voice at the table when decisions are being made, typically it will improve the product that you might be trying to sell to a consumer or services that you're trying to provide to community, right?
Absolutely, Mark. And I think what our next guest and this conversation that we've had today with our guest with Theo, it's about representation inside and outside of the disability community, right? Like we have all these boards and commissions, and we're going to unpack that with Theo about his role on the National Council on Disability. It's wonderful, but we also need the voices of the disability community on commissions and boards, like the role you wear in New Orleans, kind of day in and day out with transit and transportation. We need more of that. That's really going to be, in terms of representation, what changes, I think, the system.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And to that point, that's why I do that work, right? Like it's such a big topic. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that space, but I'm excited to be doing it.
And we need you to do it. And I think, not to bring it back to Able, but I'm going to, for the first time ever, because of Able and the power of Able counts, the disability community has representation, more representation than it's ever had before
Right.
in the economy, just by being able to have money in your own name. Huge,
Another huge topic.
huge topic.
But speaking of huge topics, you've got one for us.
Mark, a big topic always within the disability community surrounds independent living. You and I have these conversations all the time about what's happening in Kansas, what's happening in Louisiana, and you really can't talk about this topic without having our next guest as part of the narrative. And the National Council on Independent Living and their incredible executive director, Theo Braddy. It's no exaggeration to say that Theo is a giant in the independent living movement. And he has some very specific things in common with you, Mark. I'm excited to unpack those here in this episode. But a couple notable achievements. Theo served as the chief executive officer for the Center for Independent Living of Central PA, Pennsylvania, for nearly 31 years. It was first established in 1989. He is also noted for being one of the first, if not the first, CIL leader to develop and embrace the concept of living well with a disability. Under his leadership, Mark, another thing we're going to have to talk about in this episode is he built a gym and developed resources to support that goal. I don't know. Maybe that sounds like somebody who was just in People magazine and some other national media outlets. He also served with our mutual friend. We have a mutual friend in Senator Bob Casey. Theo was selected as one of the 4 Black leaders in Pennsylvania who has demonstrated power and persistency in overcoming challenges and creating meaningful change in the state. His contribution was acknowledged on the Senate floor at a congressional hearing. I want to hear more about that. And he's also, and Theo, I believe this is how we met years ago. He's an adjunct professor at Temple University and Millersville University and has been the ED for the National Council on Independent Living since 2023. So I think we just have to bring Theo on, Mark, if you're good with that.
Yeah, please. Theo, what's up, man?
Hey, how y'all doing, Mark? Sarah, nice introduction there. I don't know who that person you was talking to, but I do my part.
Oh, you do more than your part, man. I appreciate the humility as one who also tries to be humble. But doing this work is hard work, and we need leaders like you that have continued to break the barriers for people with disabilities, even before the ADA, right? Like,
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
that's incredible. So, I got to start with saying how much I respect you and how much I appreciate your leadership all of these years in paving the way for independent living for individuals impacted by disability, but also living well with the disability. Can you talk to us about living well with the disability means and how that can be supported?
Yeah. I coined that years ago when I was into fitness. Right. I might not look like that now, but I was into fitness in a big way. Just want to cut this phone off. And I realized that none of the fitness facilities was accessible, right?
Mhm.
And we had advocated and tried to do that, but none of these fitness facilities really want to mess up their image in regard to their body perfect, right? And
Right.
so it hit me right there as I was advocating for change that why shouldn't we do it, right? We know disability. And so I brought that back to my board and one of my board of directors, and I thought I was going to have a hard time with it, but he said go for it, right? And not only that, he donated the first $10,000 to buy our first piece of equipment. And so that told me I was in the right direction. And from that point
Mm.
on, I went for it. But the living well came basically based on the fact that you can live independently, but that doesn't mean you can live well independently. And often a lot of people, we get them out of nursing homes and we get them out of this situation, and all of a sudden they find themselves in the community and they become isolated and don't really know what to do. And so I began looking at living well as that next phase of
Mhm.
what to do, right? Because living well means different things to different people,
Mm.
right? What living well to me, and not only that, as you get older, that means different things, right? One
Yeah.
time it was for me was that it was in, can I go to college, right? That was my main purpose. Later on, it became, can I want to get married, and later on, I want to get a good job. And you ask me that, depending on what phase of life I'm in, I'm gonna tell you different things, right? And
Right.
you, as you mature, things changes, and so you just can't, think that it is this or that, right? It's an individual thing, and so one of the things we always got to do is not only provide the resources in order for people to become independent, but really look at those aspirations, things that they want to do to make them happy, right? And so
Mhm.
often, sometimes that is overlooked, and that's what living well was all about. Being able to do those things that allow you to live well, to be happy, function in whatever area you want to do, and that's what kicked the whole thing off. And I still try to make that a part of my message that what do living well mean to you, right? And
Well,
as
I'll tell you, as somebody who's now walking in the same path, starting a fitness program and seeing fitness be the catalyst for building a community, right? And a safe place for this community where now they have brought all the rest of their concerns and needs, and we've had to spin off other programs and services
Mhm.
like mental health and
Mhm.
case management,
Mhm.
resource navigation, resource quarterbacking, um, in an effort to help people live the highest quality of life, right? To
Mhm.
help
Yep.
people live well,
Mhm.
so it's so important. And I think a lot of times we see healthcare organizations, I think, lose sight of that. And it doesn't feel like it's healthcare anymore. It just feels like it's health business,
Mhm.
where we're
Yeah.
really trying to focus on the caring component of making sure people are living well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I tell you, that's been my experience. Has that
Yeah.
been the same for you?
Yeah. And they miss it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Often, many times, people have good intentions, right?
Right.
And they do things in order to fulfill your need or whatever, but they don't go to that next level.
Right.
Living well means going to that next level. Whether I want to be employed, whether I want to go to college,
Hmm.
whether I want to, take up dancing, whether I want to write a book, right?
Yeah.
And so we really got into all of that stuff, and everybody should. I might not be able to write a book, but can you write an article? Right? Can you
Right.
get an article published? So sometimes it's just as simple as that. It takes a lot of time to write a book, but you can get people to where they need to be in order to be happy, little by little, right? And eventually you get there.
Well,
Beautiful.
speaking of writing and speaking of books, Theo, and thought-provoking policy recommendations, you and I reconnected last fall when you were leading what I thought was one of the most kind of incredible panel discussions at the National Council on Disabilities meeting in Providence in Rhode Island, because you timed it, you coincided with the release of a new report, a new
Mm-hmm.
NCD thought-provoking report. Mark, I know you've read it cover to cover. You're going to give our audience the cliff notes here, but the report it's really important and it's really timely because it was focused really on one of my very favorite subjects: asset and income limitation
Mm-hmm.
reform
Mm-hmm.
for people with disabilities. You and I first met during your Temple days when we were working with Senator Casey on holding a lot of stakeholder events surrounding the advocacy effort leading up to the ABLE
Mm-hmm.
passage in 2014. But a follow on to what I'd like to see in my lifetime, and that is this notion that ABLE helps people save assets, but what about income? We still are holding and preventing people from achieving their career aspirations and their career dreams because we still limit how much
Yeah.
people can earn. So
Yeah.
talk to our audience a little bit about that report, how it came to be, and kind of what do you see as the next step?
Well, that report is a great report. Matter of fact, I would like to say that's one of the uh, top maybe 5 reports that NCD has ever done, because it really gets into what affects us all, right? We all want to move up that ladder, right? But SSI and those individuals on Medicaid, right, are locked into poverty based on guidelines and regulations and all of those things that were created by people. And I say this a lot, um, who have ableist ideas, right? And they create these things based on ableist ideas and not and having able body experience, and they create these programs and eligibility things that just oppress people with
Yeah.
disabilities, right? And they get them locked into this poverty that you can never get out of, right? And so able was one of those main things that can help people with disability come out of that. But there's a lot of other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that report really outlined all of those things and then made some recommendations in order for the first time, and hopefully I can see it, that people with disabilities won't have to be concerned about their income and how much income they can save. With the current one, talking about $2,000 and you own SSI for individual, And so every penny you're gonna want to check any kind of raise you have, you got to turn it down, because I don't know about everybody else, but I'm sure Mark knows this, and I know this. One of the key things for living well or living independently is attended care. And so whatever I do, I want to maintain my attended care, my health care.
Right.
And so I was one of those persons who was stuck in that limbo, right? If you don't make that giant leap from making a significant amount of money, you are stuck in limbo
Mm-hmm.
and you're stuck in poverty based on the fact that someone believed that if you get more than $2,000 in your saving account, you don't deserve you don't deserve health care, you don't deserve other supports, and you lose out on that. And not only that, you have to, people can't even get married based on,
Right.
too much income, right? And all of that stuff is oppressive, right? And 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 I really truly believe the decision makers didn't even know they was doing this,
No.
right? And so these systems were put in place and they last for so long that's the way it's always been done, and it should stay that way. And that's nonsense, right? I don't even think there's a good reason to have asset limits. The report on one of the recommendations for the NCD report is get rid of it. Get rid of it.
Just do away. Well, and Theo, you understand this because professionally and personally, you've navigated this throughout your career and the leadership positions that you've held. But a lot of these policies that were put in place, and again, I think most people don't realize it, were put in place at times when we were still, and I think this is important from a nickel perspective, we were still institutionalizing
Mm-hmm.
people with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we have a 1938 law on the books that allows you to pay people less than minimum wage, sub minimum wage, and these income and asset limitations were put in at a time when institutions were still
Mm-hmm.
the norm. I mean, we've got to push forward as a community to do away with these archaic, outdated policies and laws.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, Sarah. Unfortunately, we still got people in power, people who have influence, people who still believe, and those are the individuals that create all the policies and laws and so forth, who still believe a certain way about people living with disabilities, right? Uh, because they are conditioned, they've been socialized to believe that way, and just like racism, you get conditioned to believe a certain way. It takes a long time to unlearn all that craziness, right? and
Mm-hmm.
and so ableism is the same thing. There's a lot of misconceptions, misbeliefs, and the way people deal with people with disability that's been passed down from generation to generation, been learned on television, been misinformation or disinformation on the social media, where you get most of the stuff that people believe wrongly about people with disabilities, and that translate into creating all of these oppressive programs and policies, right? And we got to challenge. I often say that ableism is one of the greatest challenges that we are facing in this society right now, because a lot of the stuff we do, we can put band-aids on a lot of these things, but
Mm-hmm.
until you can change people's attitudes, right, the way they believe about a certain group of people, right, and that goes into our worldview, right? When you develop a worldview of a certain group of people that is marginalized, that is oppressive, and you believe that to be true, that worldview is strong, right? And one of the
Absolutely.
things that people don't do, they don't ever want to believe that their worldview could be flawed or wrong.
Right.
They never think about their worldview. We never evaluate our worldview. And so that is the key. We just think we go about life thinking that we got all of this stuff in check. And we don't.
We
And we
don't.
don't. And we sometimes will fight to keep a wrong worldview of people, right?
Mhm.
we'll take a stance on it. And that's what, over the years, I have said this over and over again, until we can change what has been learned, because what has been learned can be unlearned. We are going to only fix a few things, because I say this a lot too. In my lifetime, I'm going to see a lot of the physical barriers alleviated, removed, but I want in my lifetime see attitudinal barriers removed, because it's one of the hardest things to do. Right?
Theo, I'm gonna add too. One of the things that I think you and I have represented and done so well was giving people a face, right? An example, and try to be charismatic leaders and push people to see the wrong in their ways. But it's hard and it's tough work. And when we talked to Sandy about the movement, right? The movement for the ADA, and hearing her say that they used the civil rights movement as an example for how they could accomplish this, but they knew that there was a perception battle to be fought and an understanding battle to be fought, right? That those were just the stories were so significant, and being able to give people a face that they could relate to and stories that they could relate to have always helped, move people's perceptions forward. But you're absolutely right. I think ableism is the existential threat for the disability community. And most people still don't realize they're a split second away from a disability.
Oh my goodness, yes. And not only people without disabilities, right? Have ableism. We internalize ableism, right? We see ourselves the way others have over the years betrayed us. And if you're not the right mindset, right, you don't have the right confidence and self identity, that you will buy into that.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll see yourself as others see you, right? Because that noise is out there, and it is always something that we see, because it took me to probably around age 25, maybe 28 more so, when I started to realize, I didn't have to, accommodate to all of these physical barriers and struggles through stuff that is wasn't all about me, but it was more about society. And people ease into that mindset, and it takes some work to come out of it.
Man, that's such a great caveat into Sarah's next question, actually, about workforce development and
where
inclusion.
So we've talked about kind of health, wellness, the ability to save money. Theo, we talk about this all the time, just the power of ABLE in terms of the wealth that's helping individuals with disabilities create $1.74 billion in assets under management. But that's assets. Let's talk about income. Let's talk about workforce development. You and Mark also partner together and serve on Centene's National Disability Advisory Board. What are some of those workforce inclusion development strategies that you think employers today, I mean, it's 2024, should be implementing?
Oh man.
Where do we start?
The number one thing is to have people with diverse disabilities at the table, right? If you don't have that, again, all you're going to get is the able body experience. That's all you're going to get, right? We do what we do. If you're an able-bodied person, you're gonna do able-bodied stuff.
Right.
All the other stuff, the disabled experience, it's something you're not gonna see or do, because that is not part of your everyday life. And most of the time, if you got a person who living in your family, you'll get some knowledge, or you interact with people with disability, you'll get some knowledge. But most of the time, it's just based on your able-bodied experiences and again, your worldview, right? That has a very oppressive ideal about people with disabilities, because this world was not designed or built for people with disabilities. And so their views of us are very negative, right?
Right.
And you only get that through interaction. And if you don't interact with me, how are you going to know me, right?
Right.
How would in the world you would ever know me? When you had a girlfriend and a boyfriend first getting to know each other, they just would not hang up the phone. No, you hang up, you hang up. They spend a lot of phone time on the phone getting to know people, right? Right? You went through it, I
Yeah.
went through it. And so you know how many able-bodied people, non-disabled people, have never interacted with a blind person,
Mm-hmm.
never interacted with a deaf person, a person who's deaf, or never interacted with a wheelchair user, right? And so if you have never even interacted with a person with a disability, how are you going to develop a relationship? And if you
Exactly.
don't develop a relationship through interaction, you're never going to see the benefit, right? You're never going to gain that knowledge, right? And it's sometimes it can be so simple,
So
right?
simple.
And I when I taught at Millersville University, and I would ask people what a lever handle would, the purpose of a lever handle. They didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue, right? That a lever handle and a regular doorknob, round doorknob, stopped me from even being able to come out the classroom. That
Mm.
I have to ask the student to open the door for me,
Right.
right? They didn't. That wasn't their experience,
Right.
right? And was they, were they doing anything wrong? No, they didn't know. We don't know what we don't know, right? And so education is the key, and experience is the key. Interaction is the key. When you can develop a relationship with people and you start treating them like human beings, your equals, and
Oh,
you ask the right questions, and you don't, the first question is not about the disability, right? It's about everyday stuff, and you start treating them like you treat anyone else, and you'll find out that these individuals are like anyone else. But you're never going to get that if you're afraid to even have a conversation with me,
Phew.
right? That you don't know what to say to me, and you say stupid stuff like, I wish I had one of those. You don't want to have no motorized wheelchair,
Right.
and so you get stupid. You get stuck on stupid, right? And you ask these silly stuff. And the first question, I used to do this, and at the end of my class, and it was all young. It's amazing how young these students are nowadays. And I asked them at the end of the class, I'm open book. Ask me anything you want, right? And this one student asked me, well, can you have sex? Right? That's where their mind go, right?
Right.
And so I flipped it on and asked him, can you have sex? And he turned all red, right? And my example was that you don't ask someone that you don't know a question like that, because you
Right.
wouldn't want to have a question like that when you roll up on the first person. Now you spend a little time with me. We walking down the street, get a cup of coffee. All right, I get know a little about you, you a little about me. Then you could ask that question, because we have
Mm-hmm.
developed some sort of a beginning of a relationship. But you know how many people will walk up to you, a stranger, and ask you that question?
I get it all the time, Theo.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I know you do, because because people do it all the time,
Man.
right? And they see you as something else
Right.
it's
and not
amazing.
equal.
It's amazing to me that it's 2024 and we continue to talk about workforce inclusion, but Theo, there's still a lot of our counterparts in different disability organizations that aren't not I mean, they talk the talk, but they're not walking the walk.
Hmm.
There's a lot of organizations that don't even employ people with disabilities, but
Hmm.
yet here they are providing services and supports, and eh, I just feel like we have a long
Oh,
long discussion.
Sarah, we do, right? And you asked me the question about Centene,
Yeah.
and so I give this to them because they make it a point to get input
Yep.
Mhm.
from different disabilities, right? And not only that, they actually listen and do the things that we bring to the table, right? And that's a big difference, right? If you're proactive versus afterthought, COVID-19 was an afterthought. That's why so many people with disabilities died.
Right.
We was not at the table, right? And so uh, we was left out. No one knew what to do, and so as a result of that, a lot of people died unnecessarily. That's how important it is to have someone at the table and someone not at the table. It's a matter of life and death. It can be that strongly put, right?
Facts. Theo, I was recently on the Jennifer Hudson show, and she asked me a similar question. I gave the exact same answer about
Mm,
Centene, and just you don't see it, in a lot of corporations, right? Especially ones their size.
yeah,
And I definitely give them their kudos on not only having the voices at the table, but listening to the advice that's given,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it
That is
means
so key. That is so
it,
key.
it's the driving factor that brings change.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, in that space, we are advocates, and we hinted on this a little at the beginning of the episode too. The work that I do with Split Second, me not even knowing this until recently, has really been the same path as a Center for Independent Living, right? You and I were both injured at a young age and had to navigate, this new life. And it's, I tell everybody it's so funny, all of the similarities in our story. But what advice would you give, or words of wisdom would you give a new advocate in the disability space like myself?
A new advocate in a disability space. Ah, man. Spend time with people that you respect, right? One of the things that I regret mostly is when I had time with Ed Roberts, when I had time with Justin Dot. I didn't know who those individuals were gonna be in the history books and what they did. Right? I don't get me wrong, I was listening, but I didn't know the impact that those individuals have. So um, you gotta take advantage of that, right? And if I would have knew, I would have took more pictures. I would have listened more attentively, right? I would have captured those moments because I missed out on all of that. Don't get me wrong, I got a few pictures, but don't get, and I got a lot of bits of knowledge, but I didn't appreciate those moments.
Mm,
Uh, and I look back on that, and because you never really know, but you do know, right? Because you see certain things,
yeah.
and so I learned from Ed right from the get go that this world got it wrong, right?
Hmm.
And 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 if you want to, make a difference, you gotta do the work, right? And never, I mean never, hold back on what you feel that society is getting wrong, right? And so forth. So and that you're on your own best advocate, right? And what affects me as a person with a disability affect others, right? And so if I'm going through something like I just said about the colonoscopy, right? I know that's a problem not only for me, but it's going to be a problem for others. So I'm obligated to try to do something about that, right? And so we have that. We have that responsibility, Mark and Sarah. We have that responsibility to challenge people thinking. And I call it STINKING, thinking, because it stinks. It stinks up the place, right? And we got to always challenge people messed up thinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's the same thing. And I thinking is that nonsense, that misconception that people have about a group of people, right? It don't make any nonsense. It don't make any sense, right? To restrict people from health care because they saved $2,000. That
Right.
should be applauded. It should be encouraged, right? But that thinking got people locked into poverty,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you know, it's all kind of thinking out there that people have about people with disabilities, diverse disabilities, that don't make any sense at all, right?
Right.
And not only that, it's not only just for people with disabilities, right? It's the other group, other marginalized group, women, right? Not being able to fight in the military till a few years ago
Mm-hmm.
because people believe that they couldn't be good combat or too emotional. All of that is nonsense, right? It restricts people from doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
HIV, right? That thinking of HIV and has it oppressed a whole group of people. COVID, you saw what the thinking about COVID did, right? They moved people, and this report, one of the reports from NCD came out. They moved people out of prison and took them out of congregate settings because they knew what? They knew COVID would spread. When it came to nursing homes, people with disabilities, they put them into congregate settings
Mm-hmm.
and people died. So they treated the people in prison better than they treated people with disabilities in nursing homes. We all saw it, right? They just put
Theo,
them
my
in. I'm
my
sorry.
no. I think you raise such a big issue about. We learned a lot during COVID. It hit our community harder than anyone. I lost my best friend Casey, who happened to have Down syndrome. She lived in a group home in a
Mm-hmm.
congregate care setting. Uh, I experienced I was her legal co-guardian, breakdown after breakdown on the lack of protocols, um, not forward thinking,
Mm-hmm.
keeping people safe, not communicating with her mom or me as her guardian. It's unbelievable, and I still feel like we have not turned the corner in terms
No,
of making
no,
forward progress and
no,
true public policy reform to keep
no.
people safe from the next
Mm-hmm.
pandemic or the next whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks volumes to what you're leading at Nickel. So what is like the top issue from a policy perspective that you all are pushing?
My goodness, we'll be here all
Where do you
day.
start? Where do you
No,
start?
no. Some top issues: home and community-based services. Top
Yep.
issue. We're in a crisis right now, right? You cannot
Yep.
find qualified direct care workers, attendant care workers, personal
Yep.
assistant, whatever you want to call them. They can't find them, right? And we know why. They don't get paid enough. They don't
Yep.
have health care benefits, and so on and so on. And we know for a fact, right? This is part of that thinking that is a lot more affordable to keep people out of institutions and allow them to live at home.
Yep.
Nursing home costs much more money. But yeah, that's that again, that's just thinking. But yeah, home and community based, number one, I think that gotta be done. And so we gotta do something about that. Sitting in the case, we've been working on some great bills too. To introduce some great bills to change that. And another one, obviously, is disaster and emergency preparedness, right? it is killing a lot of people unnecessarily. And
Mm-hmm.
again, right, people with disabilities are what? An afterthought, right? And so don't get me wrong. There's been some changes, and Sherman Gillian been doing a great job on it, and he's moving in the right direction. But still, not enough is being done. Right? It's important for us to be at the table. Right?
Yes.
Same thing. Same thing. It's important for people to be at the table. Right? It's important for centers for independent living all across the nation to be your first contact. Right? You go into a community, firefighters and emergency personnel, they don't know where the people with disabilities live, but
Right.
who does? The Centers for Independent Living, right?
Yep.
And so some simple stuff like that, meaning that you got to have some sort of a connection with local Centers for Independent Living, and have all of those plans start out before a disaster happened. Now is the time. And unfortunately, it happens so regularly now. It seems like we don't have any preparation time, but it can be done, right? It can be done. We just got to have the right people at the table, making the right decisions, and the right people at the table are not always the right people at the table, right? Senator Casey did something that most people did not do, and I say this to a lot of people, a lot of decision makers. When you read about the four leaders, the black leaders thing that on my resume, well, when he gave that out to me, he invited me and other three people to a virtual ceremony because he usually do it in DC, but it was during COVID, and so he did a virtual one. And one of the last questions he asked all of us was this, and he got to me. He said, "What would you say to decision makers that would help advance the lives or improve the lives of people with disabilities?" And I immediately said, because I got a patent answer for that, is that decision makers, people in power, need to start appointing and putting people with disabilities in these decision making influential positions. We do exist, right? Unfortunately, no one is putting us in those positions of power, right? That's where I left and went. A few months went by, and I'm retired, and I'm going, my merry way. I'm really retiring, getting ready to even start my private consultant.
Mm-hmm.
I get a call from the White House. Find out later on that he recommended me for the National Council on Disability. Right? I have said that to so many people. He was the only one called me on it. Right? That's why I appreciate him so much. Because he called me on it, and because he called me on it, I could not turn it down, and I wanted to turn it down.
I was just about to say that.
Right?
He-
I had other plans, and so, but because he did that, and I said what I said to him, and he was the only one person that ever took me up on it, I had to do it, and that is the key, though. Right? We exist. Right? People with all types of disabilities. Claudia
Mhm.
Gordon, who just became the chairperson, all kinds of different people with different disabilities that are powerful, knowledgeable people, and you can't find people to elevate to these positions that they have the lived experience to create the programs and policies that work.
Right.
And the reason that they're not some of these programs not working like SSI and Medicaid is because you don't have the right people in charge of them.
Exactly.
Leadership.
Yeah. There's ableist ideas that get implemented. They have good intentions, right? But you can have good intentions and you can oppress people.
Tuh.
right?
How much have we seen that throughout the course of history?
Making up for lost time. Well, that sounds, Theo, like the Senator Casey I know.
Yeah,
Waiting a
yeah,
couple months, putting you in
yeah,
that position, and I know I speak for Mark too. We're so grateful, and we just appreciate your role on NCD and leading the charge, because we love in Kansas our independent living centers. They're
yeah,
great
yeah,
partners
yeah,
in everything that we do in
yeah.
Kansas.
And this is something I say, and I'm gonna say it here so your audience can get it too. The U.S. of America have the best kept secret in its centers for independent living. You got programs like Centers for Independent all across. Now the county is overlooked. That is made up of the majority of people with disabilities, not only board of directors but also staff that have all of this lived experience, and rarely people take advantage of it. Corporations, businesses, some do, like Centene, like Cruise, who's developing an autonomous vehicle. You all need to look into that.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's going to be a game changer when they get autonomous vehicles that are accessible. It's going to be a game changer for accessible, affordable transportation. So when that start happening, and people invite us to the table, things will change. But right now, even now, there's a pushback on DEI,
Mm-hmm.
right? Diversity, inclusion, and equity, and also accessibility, DEIA. And people are not getting it, right? Diversity is what your organization looks like. If everybody looked the same, you got a problem. Nobody want to
Yeah.
admit that, right? Equity is about fairness, right? Are your people being fair? Are they being treated right? Right? People with wheelchair users, have the same income instead of sub minimum wage, right?
Right.
That's not equity, right? And then you come to inclusion that speaks about belonging, a sense of welcoming. Do I feel comfortable? Do you treat me like you want to have me at your office, right? When I ask for reasonable accommodations, is it a burden or is it something that you want to do because I have something to offer? When you start doing stuff like that, I want to get out of bed and come to work, even when I can't feel like it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because your organization respect me. Then of course you have accessibility, which means a lot of access, physical access, as well as language access. People who speak different language, and so I could talk all day on this stuff, but that's what DEIA is all about. And people are saying that's a bad thing.
Right.
Well, and Mark, I know you need to bring us home here, but the last thing I'll say on the DE&I piece is, in terms of where companies are, in terms of workforce inclusion for people with physical and intellectual disabilities, we have a long way to go. But we still have companies that are taking advantage of 14C and sub minimum wage when they have 14C providers in their supply chain. We have for-profit businesses that are having contractual relationships with provider organizations to pay people less than sub minimum wage. Like, wait.
Yeah.
All right, Mark. I'll
Yeah.
don't get me on my soapbox here.
We'll all be on the soapbox together, singing the same
Because
song.
I got to come back. I got to come back. I
You
talk
definitely
about
got
this
to
stuff
come
all
back.
day.
But Theo, I want to ask you one final question.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, Sarah and I do a lot of work raising awareness about able accounts. What's the best thing about able accounts to you?
It allows people to actually save money, right? For the most important things in their lives, getting back to living well, right? Independently, and being able to afford those things, right? And not have that stuff taxed. right? And not have that
Mhm.
stuff goes against the SSI Medicaid restrictions, right, of income, right? You save too
Mhm.
much, you don't even have money to buy. Maintaining a wheelchair is expensive, right? Maintaining medical supplies is expensive.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? This stuff is very expensive, and to have a fund set aside that not only you can contribute to, but your family, friends, and people who are concerned about you also can contribute. It is a game changer in itself, right? And more need to be done. There's still a lot of people don't know what able kind is about, right?
Mhm.
And so we got to educate them. And again, it's not the greatest thing, but it's the next best thing available, right? Right.
Yeah.
The greatest thing is let's get rid of asset limitations.
Yep.
But able account, I have one, right? And I use it wisely, right? And again, most people don't know about it. And so you all continue to push it, promote it, because we are having people every day. And this is the thing about disability. It don't discriminate, or everybody else does, but disability don't. And all of a sudden you're one of us, and you see how this world was not built for us
Mhm.
or designed for us. And then everything becomes a problem for you. And it didn't have
Whoo.
to be that way. So let's start being proactive right now. And the challenge becomes, how can we get our able-bodied champions to do that for us? Start fighting right
Boom. You sounded like a preacher now.
now.
We need them.
Well, yeah, we need to have these conversations. So thank you all for doing it, and
Thank you.
continue to do it. Get the word out about these things, because we don't have enough of these conversations.
Right.
No.
That's the whole reason we're doing this, Theo. But
Yeah.
we definitely appreciate your time today and your knowledge, all the wisdom that you have imparted. We definitely gonna have to do a part 2 to this and have you back on. As I
Yeah.
have just so many more questions that we could really dive into.
Yeah.
But I want to thank everybody for watching this episode. Stay tuned for the next episode of Able Today. Cheers.